Hi, welcome to my lecture on the general overview of the queen pawn openings. So, this is the queen pawn opening, basically d4. Now, I've already covered the king pawn openings, and I'd like to start off by actually reviewing the king pawn openings. So let me just back up and actually open with the king pawn and briefly review that this move by white here, this pawn, or what does this move do? Well, this pawn controls these two squares, and it frees the bishop and the queen. Okay, so that's what the king pawn move does. So what about the queen's pawn? Well, let's back up and do that one, just so we can contrast it. Well, here, this pawn controls these two squares, c5 and e5, and it allows this queen's bishop out. And it actually allows the queen to move to two new squares. While it allows the queen to move, it doesn't allow as much freedom and mobility as the king's pawn for the queen. But there's also one big difference. If you think about it, when the king's pawn was moved, it was actually unprotected was not protected by another piece, meaning if black decided to attack it by, let's say, moving its knight to here, we'd have to defend it or move the pawn. But here, this pawn is protected by the queen. So what are the goals of the queen's pawn opening? Well, they're the same or similar to the king's pawn opening, meaning white now wants to play e4. Remember, the king's pawn opening, after we moved e4, we wanted to get in d4, so it's similar. We want to get our two pawns here to the fourth rank. So, in a similar fashion, we want to always, just like the king's pawn opening, we want to control the center. We want to develop our pieces, and we want to castle. And then there's sort of one marked difference between a king's pawn opening and a queen's pawn opening. If you notice, in the king's pawn opening, these games were usually very attacking games for white. White basically said, hey, my basic theory is to get my pieces out and to kill you right away or as fast as possible. But in the queen's pawn opening, the games are a little bit more what they call positional, meaning white's not going to really come out right away and try to kill black off and very quickly, but it's going to try to just control territory. It's going to try to, white's idea is to sort of strangle black to death. So a king's pawn opening is sort of a knockout punch. That's white's sort of basic goal. And for the queen's pawn opening, it's sort of a strangulation. So my upcoming lectures, I plan to cover 6 to 8 different queen pawn openings. And I'm probably just going to cover, I know I'm going to cover these 6 in my upcoming lectures. So first, let's just start out by saying, well, how is black going to respond in this case? Well, in one of my previous lectures, I stated that the 2 most popular responses by black to d4 are d5 and knight f6. And believe it or not, all the openings I'm going to cover are going to fall under where black plays d5 or knight f6. So let's just look at d5 first, where black plays d5. So you may ask yourself, well, why did black play d5? Well, it's similar to the king's pawn opening. Here, black's going to say, well, I'm going to fight, sort of fight with you, sort of toe-to-toe for, in the center. So white moves, the queen's pawn 2, and black moves it 2. It has control. Black has control over these 2 squares, And in similar fashion, the bishop gets freed, and the queen has more room. So it's sort of fighting toe-to-toe. Now, if you don't know, the most common second move for white in this circumstance is actually c4. You have to ask yourself, well, why does white play c4? Well, basically, it's a move to control the center. And by playing c4, white is going to stab at this central square right here, d5. Now, it could have done this by playing, you would think, well, maybe it could just play before it played, before we played c4, white could just play knight to c3. But the problem is, we're going to need to attack the center. One of the best ways to do this is with a pawn. And we can't really advance the e-pawn right now because it's basically unprotected. And one of the best stabs at the center is actually by playing c4. And this would allow us now to play knight to c3. Well, you may ask yourself, this is actually called the Queen's Gambit, and this is going to be one of the first, or probably the first opening that I'll cover is c4, called the Queen's Gambit, and I'll cover a bunch of different responses by black. And one of the most popular responses by black, and the second move is actually this move, c6, which is actually called the Slav defense. But there are other possibilities, but that being one of the more popular choices, or one that I'm going to focus on. But this will be one opening that I cover, and then sort of a variation of the Queen's Gambit. It's called the Slav defense. But just to answer your curiosity, you could ask, why doesn't black just take the pawn? Well, it could. That's actually called the Queen's Gambit accepted. And black could actually take this pawn. And you think, oh, well, black's won a pawn now. Great. Black's up a pawn, but actually white can recapture this pawn. Just to show you one of the possible ways. Well, white could get it immediately back by playing checking the king, where black could play c6, can move the pawn up, or can move even the knight up, and then could just recapture. But this isn't probably not very good, because now the queen has been developed early and maybe not to its best location and can be harassed by pieces. So then you may ask yourself, if you don't know, one of the more popular responses could be e4. This doesn't look like, actually now white's attacking this pawn, threatening to capture it, and you said, well, I'll just play this move, b5 to save it. Well, white has this, white can now play a4, and if black plays c6, then white plays b3, and white's going to get its pawn back, because after some exchanges, whether we'll get the pawn back, possibly check or whatever. And I've actually had people play this against me who think they can retain their pawn, but what ends up happening is that white always gets its pawn back, and usually black is not looking too hot. White quickly castles, and white usually gets a better game. Every time I played this as white, I've come off with a better game. Well, let me continue this in the next lecture.